Hey. Hello.
Hello. What are you doing?
I am painting a box for a baby to play with. So that's what I'm doing physically, but I'm also taking a little bit of headspace time out. So we're sort of, what's the date today?
It's 31st.
31st. Oh, yeah. So we're 9 days away from the Art in the Park event, celebrating the residency that I've had. So I'm just taking out a little bit of time in my head as well to think about what I've got to do, think about where I'm going with that, both in terms of the sort of work that's already very much underway with the support, wonderful support of women in the studio, and also just, there's some organisational things I'm thinking about, but mostly it's just taking a bit of time out just to sit with my plans, sit with my thoughts, sit with this. There's 2 pieces of work that I wanted to make, and it's quite likely, well, I think how to explain it? It's quite likely that I can get one of them done. I am less sure of is in the doing of it, whether it will be like with the time that I've got, whether that does it justice, if that makes sense, or whether I have to let go of doing it. I'm far away from letting go of doing it. I'm very far away from letting go of doing it. This is the first time I've even given myself a moment to think of that possibility. Though I only let go of the second piece really yesterday. That was easier to do. The second piece hadn't been calling me. So the piece that I'm wanting to produce has been festering, demanding attention inside my head for about a month. But I've had so much other things to do that I've just gone, yeah. I'll do you. I'm coming. And then I've started. And because it's brand new, it's not like, so there's 2 different phases in the process of making the sculpture for this. Most of it is a development of work that I'd already, the development of a series of work that I'd already started. So from a technical point of view, not necessarily an aesthetic point of view, there's still some growing to be done with them aesthetically, but a lot of the technical is already resolved, if that makes sense. So the heads behind me, the methodology, everything, absolutely everything about how they're made has already, I'd already reached a point where I knew and I was happy with, in terms of the material, with terms of the process, everything. So that just meant I was just free to manifest them, for them to come into life. Whereas this piece of work that I've got not only needs to be, I don't know, I'm not sure. And I suddenly found myself exploring a whole new technique. And I'm not sure if this is the time to be doing that. But then I'm like, sometimes, like when you're making work, there's lots and lots of things for me that go into the process. And time, and how much time you've had, or what the quality of that time is just as vital as like the materials that I might use or techniques or whatever. So I'm trying to accept that. I'm trying to go with that, and I'm trying to go with whether I'm going to stick with squareness of the design on this. So this is a box that 2 of the children children of artists who've been involved in the project have started work on. This is a charity turkey. I have no idea what a charity turkey is, but this is basically, a charity turkey is a turkey saying charity. And then this is like from my own childhood, if that makes sense, which is a way of making pattern. That it's, I suppose nowadays they have these mindfulness things that people fill in, and I was obviously doing mindfulness from about age 6. Always ahead of the times, yes. So,
It's a bit more about baby Ekua.
baby Ekua.
Yeah, what were you like
Baby Ekua.
then? What was she like?
Wow, baby Ekua. What was she like? Gosh, what was she like? I'm not entirely sure. I can remember some of her experiences, but who she, like, what, I don't know. She was like me, I suppose, in all intents and purposes. Certainly, I have a really strong recollection of my 6th birthday, of turning 6 and going, right, that's it. I'm grown up. And I've never had such a strong feeling of that transition than I had when I was 6, which I think probably means I am still 6, which is quite interesting, isn't it? So before that, it's really interesting. I was raised by a woman who gave me endless opportunities to be creative, like constantly, always. I mean, my earliest memories, so I'm adopted, so I was adopted at 6 weeks. So really my life memories start from 6 weeks. Though recently I've begun to develop a relationship with my birth mother, so who had those first 6 weeks. And we haven't yet had much of a conversation about those first 6 weeks. So with my adoptive family, we moved to the South Pacific. They were Christian missionaries in the South Pacific. So one of my earliest memories is sitting on the floor. My mother made all her own clothes. She made our clothes. Sitting on the floor in her sewing room with a needle. I'm probably 2.5, and a patch of fabric and sewing. And then making little gardens and saucers. I mean, I was the sort of child that you could just give something to and I would just spend hours with it. My son actually is quite similar in that, when he was a child, that sort of attention span. My daughter's more words than things. So I guess I was that. I was always singing. I'm still always singing. And sometimes I was asked not to sing so much, which is interesting. I never, ever tell a child not to sing or modify their singing, because for me, it wasn't a good thing, particularly in church. So I was often told to stop singing in church. And I think probably I was manifesting my own sort of like ancient connection with a sort of African churchy, and was probably going for it. And it didn't really work with the sort of English congregational audience that I was with. I don't know. I have no idea. But to this day, put me in a church and it's like my voice is gone. I can't sing loud. I mean, it's a physical manifestation. I can no longer sing loudly in a church. It's really, I step away from the church and I'm singing the hymns at the top of my voice. I mean, I don't go to church very much because I'm no longer Christian. But in the church, it's like that. It's closed my throat, being told not to sing. It's weird. So I was sensitive. I was definitely sensitive. Pathologically shy by the time I was 7 or 8. And to the point where I sort of had to make a decision in my teens whether this was going to be what would control my life, or whether I was going to actually have a life. Yeah, I think if I'd allowed the shyness to have its way, I would never have left the house. And sometimes it's really funny trying to explain to people, because obviously I come across as quite confident, and I am. That's a real, practiced but real. But sometimes I'll walk into a space and it's just there. It's come into me, the shyness. I'll turn around and walk straight back out again, because I have no choice. I can't physically be in that space. It's hard to explain to people. It's just like me, the real me comes, no, you're not doing this. Go. And off I go. So that's part of who the baby Ekua was.
So he talks about you struggle as a child, as a baby Ekua, being shy. Now, what has been your biggest struggle?
Oh, that's interesting. I I really believe that there's something about the structure of who I am that doesn't quite work in the world. I've been trying to work out what that's about. Okay, here's an example, really interesting. On Facebook, you know how you get caught on Facebook. So this morning, a woman who I really like, who normally posts very political stuff. No, she posted it on Instagram, not Facebook, because I went back to look for it, and it said that the song that was #1 in the charts on the day that you were born defines your life. All right, that's interesting. So, really busy, knackered, things to do. No, I'm going to spend some time finding out what tune was #1. So I started the research, and I found this tune, and it was hard to find because when the charts, which is #1, my birthday is the 8th of August, and it was like this week is the 4th, and then the week beginning what track would have been actually #1. Then I realized I was looking in the wrong year. I was looking in the year of my birth. Because I went back to sort of post it, and I went, because it hasn't resonated. It didn't make, the song that I found didn't make sense to me. That one was called, I can't remember. They really didn't make sense, either of the tunes. So I went back to say, no, I don't think so. And I realized I'd got it wrong. It was the year that you turned 14. And the track that was #1 when you were 14 would define the rest of your life. So I went back again, said 14, that would have been 1975. So August 1975. It was mad. It was stylistics. I can't give you anything but love. And that was just absolutely spot on in terms of what the foundation of my life has been. And that is doesn't necessarily always pay a dividend of love back. The world can be exploitative. It can be want to take advantage. So phrase the question again. What was it? What
has been the biggest struggle of your life?
I think the biggest struggle therefore is to be not just consistent with that love is the foundation of how I live my life, but I sound weird, to justify that, particularly with people who love me and feel that creates space for me to be hurt or taken advantage of. So it's for me, it's an almost impossible thing to resist. And I don't want to resist it, obviously, because yes, bad stuff has happened. There's that struggle to remain, to have love at your core, to love the people around you. Lets in shit, it does sometimes. But it also gives the space for amazing things, for beautiful people to come into your life and to be part of your life. And it also, so I wish there had been a safer way. Sometimes some of the things have been the struggle to stay safe, I guess, if you're going to talk about struggle, and to also then keep my family, especially my children, safe within that. And to understand that to love is not a simple thing. It's not a simple thing at all. You have to really think about it. Except when that love is very much for yourself, where you're meeting your own needs in loving, and not to say don't do it, but just to recognize that exists. To also know when withholding, love can't always be manifested just by constantly giving. That actually can take away from people's power themselves. It can take away from their own agency to take control of their own lives. So it's a complex journey to love. To do that in a way that really makes sense, you have to be vigilant. Is this still loving? Or has this shifted into something else? And what is actually needed here? And it's quite interesting. And now I'm really trying to work with that. I'm writing it right now at the moment with someone very close to me, where I'm having to recognize that actually I need to push them back onto their own resources. That if I continue to give the amount I've been giving, I actually keep them down. I keep them dependent. I don't, however painful and however much crisis they may feel they're in, I have to allow them to recognize their own strength. It's a little bit that point where they've learned how to swim, but they don't think they can. So the only way you can do is say, actually, you're going to have to spend some time in the water on your own. and that's a loving a loving thing to do. But it can, it's a difficult thing. It's a difficult thing as well. So that's the greatest struggle. What it is to be loving and how to do that consistently. Yeah. It's funny because it is something I'm really grappling with. And that thing I was saying, like with my son in particular, we're really coming to terms with some stuff because he wants to understand what that's about, and yeah, so that's quite interesting.
So I'm sensing that has to do a bit with your family. So what does...
I think ultimately, yes, I think there's a big bit of it around family. I think as an adopted person, you're constantly questioned and therefore become questioning. You're not as a child, you just accept the family you're given when you're a child. But even then people will come with questions constantly. And I'm also transracially adopted, and that just throws up all sorts of stuff. Well, I'm also dual heritage transracially adopted. Oh my God, it's like some sort of... Everybody has their tuppence worth to tell me about me and my own identity. Gets on my last nerve sometimes. But yes, so I suppose there's a little bit of me that feels I have to defend the sanctity of a family that is constructed not through blood. Because it is a very precious, it's as much, my family to me is as precious as and important as anybody else's family to them. But and then as a translation, it's like, people are constantly telling you that your family isn't real or that those relationships aren't valid. And that's painful, especially when you're young. Or things like being asked, did you ever fancy your brother? Who asks somebody if you fancy your brother just because he's not your blood brother? Yeah, I think I was about 13 when someone asked me that question. It's horrible. It's really horrible. Or people talk about, what about your real mother? And you're like, wait, what is a real mother? That woman who's nurtured me since I was 6 weeks old. Which doesn't mean that I don't have some resonance with the woman who birthed me, because I am learning that I do definitely have some resonance with her, and some of that's quite difficult. I'm glad that I didn't find my birth mother or didn't make contact with her until after my adopted mother was passed away, because I think I'm glad I didn't have the distraction of worrying about her. I think it's difficult enough to form those relationships without worrying, am I doing this as a solid or a discovery box? How can you imagine a baby that peck its head, it can get in all the other boxes, and then there's suddenly a box that they can't get in? Oh, I'm so torn. Box, what are we doing with you? And I do like flaps. You see, some of the boxes I think can stay just as boxes. Amongst all this, they can just be brown boxes, because the colouring of them is more to satisfy my aesthetic. I know I'm getting distracted, but I'm going to talk about boxes. So I originally called the area the baby sculpture area, so because it's what, when they're piling them up and engaging with them, that's what the sculptural process is of discovery and uncovering. So the colouring of them, the bringing in, was to tie them in aesthetically with my sculpture, so with the fabrics. It's been very interesting because the volumes are needing other people involved, working then with their aesthetic and what they bring to it. I realise that I am quite fussy. And sometimes, as in with the two wonderful women, where are they, who have done most of the lettering, that's just been really well rewarded. It's like the quality of the work you've done is you're better than me. And that's just perfect for me because it's my concept and you've done it, executed it. Some of the boxes, I'm like, but then actually they are going on a journey of their own. So that's quite interesting. That's got nothing to do with what I've planned. That's to do with the engagement process, which I'm also really excited by and engaging with. But yeah, so this is the first time I've thought, well, actually, there can also just be some box-coloured boxes. But not yet, because to make me feel comfortable in your process, I need to be doing something with my hand. So that is what I'm going to be doing. And I like the green. The green is good. I'm going to get paint on this. Right, there we go. So I'm sure there was a question you asked there that I then just got distracted.
That's fine. So you've been making art all your life, would you say?
Yeah.
I'm sure it means a lot to you. What would you say it means to you to be an artist? When did you start calling yourself an artist?
It's really interesting. I was writing my biography the other day, and I realised that I don't remember going to art galleries. My mother was interested in art, and she was an artist, but she'd stopped being an artist before we came along. But I wasn't raised in that sort of where you went to art galleries and you talked about art, you knew the names of artists. Not at all. So, but I knew by 15 I wanted to go to art school. So I don't know whether it was a romantic thing. I was a massive reader. So I'm sure there would have been art students in something that I would have read. Or, maybe. When I was very young, and I have no idea quite where this came from, I was in primary school. And our primary school teacher went in my last year. So I was 10. Most everyone else would have been 11. But I'm an August person, so I'm always much younger than everybody else when I'm in primary school. He showed us this film called The Prime of Miss Jean Brodie. I'd never thought about this before, and I'm sure that may well have had some references to art students. It certainly talked about the Spanish Civil War, so I don't know if there's a crossover there. It's an odd film. It's a very odd film to show 10, 11-year-olds, but there you go. So I was 15 when I said I'm going to art school, and I went when I was 16. So I would have finished my what were called O levels at that time, and I was bright. So I was one of those people who flourished in all subjects, in sciences as well as arts. So my mother was sort of what's called blue stocking. She came from a time where women had to really fight for their education, and she was aware that I was bright and wanted me to sort of excel with that stuff. She wanted me to do the whole Oxford, Cambridge thing. I'd even thought of getting me a scholarship to go to private school. I am so glad she didn't. She decided it would be too isolating because it would have only been me and not my brother and sister. And I think that was a very wise decision, because I have no idea who I would have been if I'd gone to those schools. Don't know. Who knows? Maybe it wouldn't have been that dramatic. I think it might have. So I went to art school young. So I left school with my GCSEs, and they weren't called that, O levels as they were called. And I did a foundation, which is what you did, which was nowadays I think in a foundation is the equivalent of 3 A levels, which then gets you automatic entry into art school, which is like university level. And then you only needed 5 O levels to get into art school. So I don't even know why I did and a foundation course. So a foundation was literally that. It was a foundation in different art forms. And even that point, going for the interview, I remember being told that I wasn't good enough to be an artist, that maybe I could do furniture design, something like that. Which is just crazy. I mean, how can you tell when someone's that age? Surely that would depend on your art teacher, how good you are. I don't know. But by then I was also already quite good at not paying much attention to other people's opinion of me. because from when I was quite young, through most of my life, actually, I've been the subject of other people having really strong and quite opposing versions of who I am. So I've learned to really ignore them, because the great thing of people being, you find that people are really sure who you are. They're really sure, that you're, they're really, really sure that you are a prude or sexually promiscuous. I mean, as women, we're always being told who we are sexually by other people. And it's usually one of those two, you're either a virgin or a whore. And I literally got both, constantly. Most people get one version or the other. I got both. I was raised, so I was adopted and raised by a white family. So in the sort of community that I was raised in, I was the girl that people wouldn't hold hands with just in case it rubbed off. So I wasn't in any way, nothing about me had any allure or attractiveness. And then when I moved to London as a mixed race woman, I was so attractive that I, and obviously knew it because I was light skinned and, fine haired, that I was so stush. And it was like, so I came from being basically growing up that you're sort of monstrously ugly because you're black, to you really think you're so fine because you're light skinned. And I'm just like, I'm glad I had both experiences, because when you have two such polar experiences, can you take any of it seriously? No. So I'm neither gorgeous nor am I that horrendously ugly. Or nor actually, but really what I learnt was other people's opinions mean nothing. They're not important. They are not real. Though everybody thinks their truth is the truth about you. Do you know what I mean? It's insane. People really think what they think is the truth. Yeah. As you can see, a lot of my work, I think, stems from that, and challenging people's truths about humanity, and particularly notions of beauty. So here we are at a juncture of how do I do all sides of this box while it's wet? So I can't. So what I'm going to do is leave that to dry and ask my gorgeous assistant to get. It's really funny, when I was making these heads earlier on my own, I've got a workshop coming up after the 9th of June. I'm doing a workshop with Michelle. Do you remember Michelle? She was the first speaker at the Creative Networks, Michelle Avelloro. And her company works with people with mental health issues, and I'm going to be making the small masks with them. So I'm finding this quite interesting to do by myself. So when I'm on my own, I was having a narrative, so I'm talking out loud about what I'm doing, about eyebrows, eyes, mouths, the structure. And then when I had other people around me, I didn't feel like I could do that. And I was really missing my own dialogue. So now I get it back. I get to just chunter onto you two while I make things. And I've also, this has been probably since you guys have known me, I've been doing a lot of talking. Yeah, I talk a lot, which is quite interesting.
And you still haven't told us when you started calling yourself an artist.
Because I don't know the answer. You do know that, don't you? I don't know when did I start? I don't know the answer. I can answer something simple, which is, when did I start being an artist? Because I think there's two, or practicing my artist. Maybe a bit like, maybe I believe we're all born artists, ultimately. So therefore the question is moot, isn't it? So there was I certainly, I was probably born an artist. Yeah, I think so. And I was lucky enough to be born as a child. My mum was a sort of child educational specialist. So I was lucky enough to be born into a place that allowed me to embrace that creativity. But I remember after I'd done my degree, my mother saying to me, "Oh, why don't you get a job in the bank? People like us aren't artists." And I know what she meant. It was quite funny, obviously, because I'd already just spent 5 years of my life training to be an artist. And she was just worried that I would, be penniless, and because who's gonna, but it's interesting. I've now found a way that being an artist doesn't, oh, sorry, I'm rambling. Often people will only accept you can call yourself an artist based on the financial reward you get for the work that you make. And I am really happy that I do not bring that into my definition of being an artist.
So what's your definition?
I don't have a simple definition, apart from what I said, which is that we're all born artists. Okay, I can talk about some of the things. So, for example, a lot of the way I work and the materials I work with are within the realm of what's called craft, which is fine. And what I notice is the difference is what are the things that concern me when I'm making. So I might be using glue and paper and brushes and, you know, paint and air dry clay and all this stuff that a lot of hobbyists or crafters use. But I think the questions that I ask myself, I mean, this is just me, I don't know. I'm obsessed with once a concept has dawned on me, then the point which I think I become an art, or I manifest being an artist, is the obsession and the conversation I have with between my head, my heart, my hands, the materials I'm working with. So that I'm not looking. Sometimes I think if you're using these materials and you're a crafter, you're looking for a one solution, how to make X, and then to refine X, and it's the object at the end. Whereas for me, I'm endlessly fascinated, not by the box necessarily and how perfect the box is, but by the relationship of the planes and how they interact with me and my world. And I don't know. Actually, I can't define what an artist is. I can just carry on living as one, and then dying as one, and then having books written about me as one, and films made about me as one. I don't know. I guess I also don't think it matters actually much. I'm a bit of I'm a bit of a believer that labels and all that are a construction of consumerism. You label something, you define it in order to package it and sell it and control it. So I definitely feel like that about sexuality, so maybe I feel that way. I also a little bit feel like that about religion. I don't tend to express that so much because it upsets people. Oh, that's interesting. Yeah.
Can you tell us a bit about the sculptures behind you? Tell us a bit about them.
The faces?
Yeah, please.
Okay. So these are the faces of 8 pieces that I'm making for the park. They came originally from a series called called The Leadership. So I was exploring, so I was at Chuck Gallery. I was doing work in response to the collection there. And there was a piece by an artist called Abayomi Sekunu, and it's called Leaders, something like that. Something about leaders, which I can't. And so I was exploring for myself what are the qualities of leadership, particularly at that point, what are the qualities of leadership that are needed in the world today and everything that's happening in the world. And I came up with a list of what I felt they had to be, you know, intelligence, compassion, authenticity, honesty, blah, 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 blah. And then I also was really interested in that how there's such, I was interested in what are the faces that we feel embody those qualities, and how African faces are rarely used to embody positive qualities. So I wanted to create a piece of work that was, this is the root of these aren't all African. So the root was these pieces of work were non-gendered, but they were very definitely African, and they were my interpretation of those qualities. When I came to put this proposal together, I wanted to take that further and explore that around women and women's leadership and women's sort of political agency. So what I've done is I've tried to explore female faces. What are the faces of women internationally, away from hair, clothes, because actually there's a point where male female is much less, we dress it up, we create a gender divide by how we style the bodies of men and women. Obviously there are body parts, but in all intents and purposes we're just human beings. So these pieces are that series taken more into a celebration of women and women's agency and women's political activism. They will have more text on them. Only one of the pieces before had text. These will have text on them, which we're working on, and they will be more woven into also the whole park, so the residencies within the park. So they will be more rooted, and they will be more branched. And I can't say much more about them at this stage. I really, really, really tried to find a series of unique. Each of the pieces has two faces, and I always said I'm not making portraits of people. I am investigating the human quality of women from around the world, and then finding it a way to present that and present their language and their text. So these are now 8 pieces, because I'm going to put in some of the others into the park, so that there'll be 10 going in. There's that piece is coming up. I have no idea. That's changing by the minute. It's like I'm going, I haven't got time for you. Anyway, we'll see. I can accept unfinished pieces in this, so that it'll be funny if it just comes a pile of that, but I'm hoping not. So they will be around the park for people just to stumble upon, but I'm also creating a bit of a program of events and things happening, whether they're marking other things in the park. So one of them marks the exhibition and the films in the lodge. One of them will mark where we've got the pots and plants, and we've got a residents association coming in. A couple of adults are bringing some young people, and they're going to plant the plants in the pots. A bit of an Earth Day thing, just so you feel with the inspiration. And then they'll take them to their residences where they live to help brighten up the area and to sort of encourage the local residents to invest in their communal area. And then I've got the babies in boxes. So one of these pieces will be with the babies in boxes, and hopefully a marquee, because if it rains, the babies can still play with the boxes. Then we've got the workshop. There'll be one in there. Anya's doing the workshop. Then there'll be one at the furthest corner of the park, and hardly anyone goes to. There may be more than one. So any excess that I make will go down there. I'd like there to be 3, but we'll see. And then I'm going to also probably put... me and Lena are having a discussion about this. I'm having a frame also covered in fabric, and for me that piece is called Put Yourself in the Picture. So I want to encourage people to take pictures of themselves in the frame and then Instagram them to us with the hashtag Women Hold Up Half the Sky. Because that harks back to my original, that piece in that far distant place goes back to my original idea, was to have the pieces coming between the trees and the long grass, of the idea of women coming out of the shadows and having their voices heard. And what I'd wanted is to have people very much interacting with those through Instagram and YouTube or whatever, Facebook, just sort of taking their own pictures. So I'm hoping to have the frame down there. Elena thinks, because no one goes down there, that it won't get used, but I'm thinking, well, we can direct people. At my registration point, there will be 2 fantastic young people. You must go, is she going to stop calling us young people? We are in our mid-20s, but anyway, up to about 40, I call people young people these days, who will direct people to go and do it down in the corner. And And then there will be one in the pavilion with the pop-up exhibition from Chuck Gallery. And then there'll be one at the start of the Woodland Walk where there's the music circle. And there'll be one at the end of the Woodland Walk where there is the word bed. So how many is that? So that's lodge, pots, babies, workshop, far corner, pavilion, woodland. 8. So hopefully with the extra 2, I will be able to have 3 in the far corner with the frame. Yeah, and this, if it gets done, is going to be seated on a bench, and the bench will be padded in the same fabric that it's covered in. It's actually going to be a self-portrait if it gets done, so that somebody can actually sit with the sculpture. It'll be a seated figure. Very much, I know where I'm going with that, and for people to just be with the artist in a way, and with her form, and in the soundtrack at that point, you can hear it's sort of, there's lots of birds around, so it's a place where you can really immerse yourself in the sound of the park, the natural sound of the park, rather than the human intervention, because there's lots of sounds at the park.
It's like you always do so many things. And how do you get motivate yourself and overcome the burnt out?
Yeah, this project's this project made Chuck Gallery like pale into insignificance in terms of the difficulties of overcoming it, I can tell you. That's one thing that there's always worse. There's always worse, there's always better. Things will change. That's one thing. Because I am the artist in residence in Alexandra Park, and that's a significant place for me, for Moss Side, and I'm really, really wrapped up in my local area at the moment. I feel like it's an area that's really under attack. It's always been demonized. It's had a bad press. It's always been about gangs and guns and knives. And now I feel like the city council is sort of taking their mickey. They're really treating local people and the residents with very little respect. And they're stripping away the assets and the resources of the area. So at the last boundary change, so Whitworth Park and Whitworth Art Gallery are in Moss Side, and they've changed the boundary to make them Ardwick, which means the next people who live in Ardwick live the other side of the hospital. So this park is being like disassociated from its own residents. So the people who live by the park, that park is no longer in Moss Side. It doesn't mean they can't go in it. It's just that sort of like, what's Moss Side got? Well, it hasn't even got Whitworth Park and Whitworth Art Gallery. And at the other end, there was a bus station on Princess Road, which was also in Moss Side. And that's being redeveloped with houses. Probably people can buy their own houses and stuff. They've literally done a line like this and taken that into Whalley Range. And that's just purely and simply so they can charge more to sell those houses. But it also means, therefore, the Moss Side doesn't have houses. If people have children who are aspirant and want to buy their own home, they can't do that in those houses and still be, like politically part of Moss Side, join political parties and be an activist in Moss Side. They're sort of stripping away the opportunity for that area to grow and develop and mature and, excel. It's sort of making more and more what they call homes of multiple occupancy, student homes, which are nothing against students, but when you have houses where no one has an investment in terms of living in them for very long, maybe you've been visiting it, like the streets down opposite the toast rack, the student streets, they're a mess. I don't know if they're messy, the houses are unkempt, and they're all student houses, and people earn loads of money because they charge per room, and they put 10 rooms in per house, and there's no community, there's no, it just destroys the actual fabric of what a locality is. They're doing more and more on that in Moss Side because they can earn so much money and they can charge more money. And then, it makes me, so I'm really committed to Moss Side at the moment. So for me, as a Moss Side living person, artist who'd been asked to do this, I was not going to walk away from it, however big the challenge, because this is the beginning of something. For me, it's tied up sort of hand in hand with this project. I'm also keeping my own political life is beginning to grow and change, and they're part and parcel of the same thing. I'm really keen to look at how arts and culture is a tool for, I've got, on the event on the 9th, I've got 3 have confirmed, political women talking about, and I've asked them to speak on, why I support arts and culture as a tool for engagement by women in a political life. And there's a reason. Obviously it's my residency and it's great, but I also want to go back to them. So there's 2 women councillors. There's somebody who's doing a project and she's already gone forward to be selected to be an MP. And then there is a 4th woman who is quite a senior leader. She's a national lead for children and young people in Women's Aid. So I will then go back to them and go, you remember when you said, right, what we're going to do? How are we actually going to raise the profile of arts, not as some sort of luxury thing, you know, that you fund after you funded the hospitals and the schools, but actually as an essential right that people have to be represented and to see themselves represented through art and culture. Because that's the springboard, I think, from which people are empowered to get education, to go on to have degrees, to, you know, struggle to have decent housing, to argue that the schools their children go to are decent. It needs to come from within, and I think it's only arts and culture that touches people within to give them the strength to then change their worlds. So that's why it's maybe hard, but it's not as hard as the world is. Yeah. But I am getting old, I have to say. Waking up at 7 and going to bed, you know, not getting back in until after midnight is killing me.
Can you give us a piece of advice, something that you want anyone watching this coming from Ekua?
We're full of quotes at the moment. I don't know if anything, but I will tell you the quote that's resonating with me, I suppose, and that I would say to people to take heart is, you are enough just the way you are.